I am Jonathan Zer. Have been involved with the Chamber for some time now, and I'm super stoked to be moderating today's panel discussion. I don't know if I can pull that off very well, to be honest with you. My brother would be much better at using this terminology, but in any event, thank you again for joining us. I'd like to introduce our panelists for the day, and as I go through, if you want to join us at the table, I'd greatly appreciate it. First, we have Destiny Simon, majority owner and founder of Neo Accounting. Destiny combines her traditional accounting knowledge of 10 plus years of experience, cannabis accounting training, and a heart for community to build and run two successful businesses that continue to grow and fill need in the KC area and beyond. Welcome to Destiny. Thank you so much. Next, we have John Lowe, owner and CEO of Mantis 9 Grow and Supply. John's background as a local EMT and firefighter led him to his greatest passion today, which comes from helping people find a safer alternative medicine and educating people on the benefits of the cannabis plant. Please help welcome John. And last but definitely not least to our panel discussion today, we have Antoinette Dupree, relative at the back. And Annie, I believe, is that the term I heard? Excellent. From the Spark Legal Solutions team, the Spark team is in their second year of assisting clients in entrepreneurship, tech law, civil rights, and employment litigation related to medical marijuana. Their firm is 100% female and minority owned. Please help me welcome Antoinette. Again, thank you each for joining us today. Hopefully we'll have a good discussion. You're before a number of very welcoming business individuals here in the room who are just interested in being educated and finding out what the options are moving forward. But before we get started with a few of the discussion questions that I've been provided, I'd like to give you each a couple minutes to introduce yourselves, your background and your expertise in the area of medical marijuana. And with that, I'll start where I started for our introductions and with Destiny. Destiny?
Hi, my name is Destiny Simon. I am co-owner of Neo Accounting and Cannabis by Neo. And for medical marijuana, I serve in the industry as an ancillary business. I provide expert accounting for cannabis businesses that help them maximize 280E and 471. I know a lot of you may not know what that is, but it's all the rules that basically say a marijuana company cannot take any business deductions outside of cost of goods sold. So people think cannabis businesses make tons of money, the most lucrative, but they are actually some of the brokest businesses that there are. And then I also am a certified commission, and what that means is I've gone through a program that is duly accredited through 2 different boards here in the United States, and I'm able to help make treatment plans for any type of diagnosis that people get and help them to better their lives.
Thank you, Destiny. Appreciate it. John?
Yeah, my name is John Lowe. I'm the owner of Mantis 9 Grow and Supply, actually here in Independence, right next to Mead's restaurant. We took over that building and renovated it. It hadn't been leased in 5 to 6 years. I started my cannabis journey actually about 5 to 6 years ago when I was on the fire department. And I kept running into houses and, you know, Mrs. Jones handed me a grocery sack full of medication, and it was always the same response. Why do you take all that? Well, I need, 15 of them for the 2 that I actually need to combat all the side effects. So it just quickly led me down a rabbit hole where I just, dug further and further down and finding the true benefits of this plant and the stigma that's been placed on it for over 100 years and why that stigma was placed on it. So I just kind of found it a passion of mine to basically bridge that gap between people who are on the fence, don't know much about it, I welcome you into my shop, we can have a conversation. But that's kind of how I started my journey. My business does, we're actually a soil and biochar company where we make and design and engineer certain specific organic amendments in things that are engineered for the cannabis plant itself. So we do ship those out across the country. Actually, we've been shipping some to New York, Kansas, Nebraska. So, but again, thank you for having me.
Thank you, John. Sure, appreciate it. Before you pass the mic on, I want to make sure and also point out, thank you so much for participating in helping to make 40 Highway a more business thriving portion of our community. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
John. Yes, sir.
Hi, thanks for having me today. So about August 2019, there were a lot of licensing applications for cannabis that were being turned in, and we helped with a lot of those business licensing applications. So I, by trade, was a employment discrimination and civil rights attorney, and we came together, my law partner, Jasmine Abu-Qasim, who is here, and another law partner who has since retired due to a serious health condition that she had, all came together to do these licensing applications, all having a different area of expertise that we can add to the licensing applications. There were many questions on the licensing applications that dealt with, well, how are you going to prevent discrimination? And tell us about what the economic impact is going to be, your business and what it's going to add to the economy. And those were a lot of the questions that I could answer with my background. Jasmine did a lot of the business entity formation documents, where they would have articles of incorporation that they would have to turn in. These were a lot of craft cannabis clients that we were helping too, that weren't big business coming from another state, who had all the resources to get these filing applications done, because they were very intense. It was very intensive work. So that's really how we got started, and we are an all-women, all-minority law firm. We still do our separate areas of law, and that's how we got into this. So,
Thank you very much, Esther. So my brother knows that I'm doing this today. He is attuned to this particular industry, and he's going to be texting me throughout. I'm not going to use any of his questions. They're just sitting there. I'm going to maintain some degree of deniability for it. Let's start off. A couple of real quick beginner-level questions for us. We hear multiple terms thrown around: CBD, hemp, and now medical marijuana. What are the differences, and what will we see as this rolls out?
So I usually always like to use the term cannabis. I'm a big believer that pot, weed, all those things, all those stigmatisms. So the cannabis plant, is obviously broken up into subspecies of that plant, being hemp, marijuana, and so the distinction for the federal government is that anything that is 0.3% and lower in total THC values is hemp. So that can be industrial hemp, that can be high CBD strains. So that anything that is over that is going to be classified as marijuana. So most growers, if they're trying to grow just CBD strains, that's what they'll call and refer to like a hot plant, if it crosses that threshold, because now they have to destroy it.
What will we end up seeing as far as the industry is concerned for grow-type facilities? Will they all be, do you anticipate indoor grow facilities, or do you anticipate this is going to be operating like farm with outdoor operations?
I think in the beginning you're going to see a lot of greenhouses, you're going to see a lot of indoor operations, but as the markets develop, typically in these other areas, you see people trying to go outdoors, because we kind of refer to it as a race to the bottom, because like anything you manufacture, you're trying to create the same quality product for the least amount of cost. And having these high, state-of-the-art facilities look cool, but they cost a lot of money to run. So my group, actually, we did also apply for licenses, and we were going to be an underground greenhouse. So we used the geothermal, capabilities plus translucent roofs that use natural light, so less carbon footprint impact on the environment.
Yeah, thank you. And so continuing to keep it moving on, if there's anyone else that wants to comment on any of these questions, I want to make sure to pass the mic down.
I just want to add real quickly too, because I think that people don't understand cannabis and CBD. Both are cannabis. It's just, as he explained, one has a higher concentration of THC. They look identical. They can come in all forms. They come in flower form. They can come in vape form, oil form, edible form. And so this is something that law enforcement and prosecutors and things like, we need to get educated on the law, because they look the same. They're exactly the same in appearance and exactly the same in smell. And someone, you have a legal right to have hemp on your person, no matter who you are. And you have a legal right, if you are a certified patient, to have cannabis on your person. And so I did at least want to just make that known for people who don't know that.
Are there maximum numbers of plants and maximum amounts that they're allowed to have legally?
Well, yes, are you talking about a consumer?
Yes.
So you're allowed to have 4 ounces on your person, or to purchase 4 ounces at a time. That's per month. If you are a home grower person that has a license to grow your own, then you can have 8 ounces on your person at a time. And then you can have 12 flowering plants at a home, I believe, a 3-month supply. 6, sorry.
And I wanted to just add really quickly, you asked, how do you determine medical marijuana or what is it? And a word that I have picked up in my condition studies, and a way that I really like to help people understand this is medical versus recreational is really more like focused versus just a general effect. So if you're using it for a medicinal purpose, there's a focused reason you're using it. There's whether that is you have anxiety, you have PTSD, you have rheumatoid arthritis, you can have all of these different things, and it's just using that plant as a very focused treatment plan. There are people that use it casually, which is like adult rec, but like, and that, I said it wrong. It's Antonym. I'm so sorry, I would say it all the time. But there's no way to determine if somebody has CBD or if they have medical marijuana. You don't know why somebody's using it. And it's just really important too that we are giving individuals a right to their medical privacy. Like that's really important to me. So to try to ask somebody, oh, what do you use it for? I mean, to me that feels like an invasion of privacy almost.
Going along those same lines, you mentioned a couple of the options or a couple of the medical diagnoses that can be prescribed, and it's not actually a prescription for it, it's simply qualifying to be able to use it, as I understand. Is that correct?
Yes, it is a medical recommendation. You can't get a prescription for it. The doctor can just say, yes, you have one of the qualifying conditions to be able to use this as a focused treatment plan.
And I know it's a relatively extensive list of prescriptive items that you can go for. Can you give us some additional examples?
I don't have them on the resume. There's a
Well, Missouri is one of the most permissive states as far as the medical conditions that they will allow you to be certified for. So she did mention some chronic migraine headaches comes to mind, ADHD, Parkinson's disease. It's known to treat Parkinson's disease very well. It stops the shaking. It's just about anything. Now, if you're talking about a psychological disorder, then you can't just then you must go to a psychiatrist and have them give you a prescription saying that basically, this would be indicated for the type of condition that you have. But it is one of the most permissive in the state. It would be probably a better list to come up with, or a shorter list of the things maybe you might not be able to use it for. But yes, it's just, you could nearly come up with anything, I would say.
Some of the ones written in the language, which is Article 14 in the Missouri Constitution, are glaucoma, epilepsy, terminal illness, cancer, some of the others that Antoinette mentioned on. And I think what she's really trying to say is that recommendation is that it's kind of like a catch-all at the end, that if that physician or psychiatrist who has to be in good standing with the state of Missouri, the Board of Healing Arts, if they see really for any fit that you could benefit from it, they can recommend that. So.
From the perspective of business side of it, Congress is currently debating legislation that would allow marijuana dispensaries to use traditional banking. How much of a limitation is that for dispensaries at this particular time, and how are they dealing with those particular transactions?
Well, it's really not just dispensaries. I mean, it's all of them. Even when we went through our applications, finding out and working with CPAs out of Denver who've already been established out there for years, we found real quick that, cash deposits were a huge issue. Huge fees, no small business loans. So in the beginning, in a lot of these other markets, you would see these business owners just had a lot of cash and they couldn't take it anywhere. It was hard for them to pay their bills. A lot of people weren't accepting cash to pay their bills. So they stuffed them in storage units and had armed, they'd hire ex-military to arm and guard their cash deposits until they could find banks. Typically, most of the people I know out there do business with, they jump from bank to bank a lot because that just happens. So they use a lot of state banks, credit union banks, anything that's non-FDIC backed. Any additional?
Well, real quick, does everyone understand why banks will not loan to these marijuana businesses? Can anyone guess? It's because they're federally insured, a lot of times, they're federally backed. And cannabis is still illegal federally. So there are some local credit unions that we've seen that will go ahead and loan. But if you can just imagine, any of you who are business owners, have you gone through your business and not been able to get a loan for any money or help? I mean, these people they deal with a lot of security issues as well. I mean, they have to pay, it's very costly for them because they are dealing in action and they have to have security that will, protect their business. So that's a lot that goes into this. Is there anything else?
So for cannabis banking, like they said, it is it's cash heavy and it's dangerous. And there is a lot of support in the government to move forward with banking, but there's also a lot of pushback. There are programs and credit unions that are doing it and just doing it really carefully. So the real thing that anybody in the industry can tell you is compliance is key. If you think you've been compliant enough, go another step further in that detail. Take another step to not only protect yourself, but protect your business, protect your employees, all of that, because it is very dangerous and it is hard for the industry as a whole. Even as an accounting business, an event business, we are constantly at risk of having our account shut down because we work with cannabis businesses. We get charged higher banking fees. It's a lot, and it hopefully is going to change sooner than later, but that's just kind of the story right now.
I just also wanted to make a point that, some of these dispensaries and facilities, they can use credit cards through third-party credit card processors a lot of times. But again, as a business owner, you do all this work and you put all this into it, and at the end of the day, you find they're making a little bit of money and the fees are just enormous. There's companies in other states that they'll send you security boxes, basically, they send them on an airplane, and go back, and of course you can imagine the fees that are involved in that. And now own and operating a business where I actually get to see patients that come in who are growing their own medicine at their home. Truth be told, a lot of these people are vets, and they still, they don't want that paper trail, so they pay cash, so.
You hit on a couple of things that comment that leads into my next question for you. We talked about the impact on the dispensaries, you talked about the impact on banking potentials, and on obviously the accounting side of it. Are there certain industries or businesses that are also going to be directly affected by the passing of medical marijuana in Missouri? And we're talking about private practices, health facilities, et cetera. And in that manner, how will they be affected? What can we expect?
Yeah, I think all three of us will probably think of different ones because there's several that are. I know the first ones that I think of traditionally, where you see these in other established markets, are liquor stores and drug stores. They're not as busy, to be honest with you. They're just not. They see a decrease in sales, and which I think is a good thing. Another thing that you do see is the areas where they put these dispensaries. At first, a lot of people think, oh, it's just going to be in a blighted area, it's underdeveloped. And next thing you know, 3-4 years down the road, everybody wants to be by that business.
For businesses that are like existing businesses, medical marijuana, like day-to-day operations, I don't think there's going to be much of an impact. You would be surprised how many of your employees, family members, neighbors, all of those are already cannabis users. They just weren't licensed before. So when it comes to day-to-day operations or impacts like that, I don't really foresee any problems. I see a lot of decrease, like John was saying, in prescriptions being written. The opioid crisis finally coming to at least lessen as people are doing this. So that's where we're going to see a lot of pushback, and we're going to see a lot of change is the alcohol stores, the prescription drugs, the firemen not having to run into a house that's burning down because these pills knock somebody out. So I think that it's just good to keep in mind, like, we were all already here, and we're just now coming out into the light.
I think it'll affect, all businesses. In the employment context, it will just affect all businesses generally. And I think that if you have a business, you should take some time to sit down and, it's really not that long to read Article 14. And you will begin to understand what your rights are as employees and as employers. And so I think if you have a business, then it would encourage you to familiarize yourself on the law, for sure.
So you comment on Article 14, but then stemming from Article 14 comes a multitude of additional regulations that may impact upon the businesses. As far as the regulations are concerned, are there specific regulations that you identify as focusing on for a business owner, which may have a business that's a non-medical marijuana business? Things that they would need to be aware of based upon the resulting regulations.
What do you mean by non-medical marijuana business?
I think I would comment to any one of the other businesses that may not be receiving direct funds for sale or dispensing or producing or processing things for.
Okay.
Perhaps an HR side would be a best approach for it. Does that help?
Yeah, of course. Yes, so I can talk about this for sure. So yes, policies are going to have to change. We have to understand too that this was an amendment to the Constitution. This is a ballot initiative. Everyone went out and voted for this, and it was an amendment to the Constitution. This is a legislation that was passed by the General Assembly. So what does that mean? It means you have a set of rights that go along with it, and the right that you have is to use and possess medical cannabis. Use it as an alternative medicine. So of course that does affect the employment context. Now, what we want to be concerned about in the employment context is impairment on the job. And what I would say about that is they're getting ready right now. I know they have it. The General Assembly, when it went on recess, it had passed SB 610, which was went through the Senate committee. So it hasn't been passed in the Senate, but it now has made it through the Senate committee. And basically, they want to make it employers be able to be allowed to test. Well, the problem that brings up is that there is currently no test for impairment of marijuana, which is what you're concerned about on the job, right? Someone coming to work being under the influence of marijuana, driving maybe a company vehicle or something like that. Well, there's two different types of employees. There are DOT regulated employees. There are OSHA regulated employees. What I'm basically getting at is they're federally regulated employees, much like what I just explained with the banking situation. So too applies with federally regulated jobs. Your UPS driver, they all fall under DOT transportation regulations, which means that those persons are not going to be able to use cannabis in the state of Missouri because federal law trumps state law. So anyway, there's going to be a lot of things that come along with this. I'll let somebody else pipe in if they want.
Keeps stealing all my questions.
I think it's important for you as an employer to know that, as far as the hiring process part of it, a lot of that, not as much of that has changed. You still have a right not to hire somebody who openly says, I use cannabis every day, so you can still drug test. I probably wouldn't, make it a known fact that you hire somebody knowing that, and you fire them later on down the road because of their use, but, I mean, those rules and regulations are in the article for your protection as an employer as well.
An employer test an individual for impairment if they know that they are utilizing medical marijuana and doing so legally.
Yes, I mean, absolutely. And, you know, honestly, I would just say, you know, don't be discriminatory against it, you know. I mean, if it's the same rules for everybody, you've made that known either through a documented employee handbook, per se, that everybody's agreed to and signed, you know, then yeah, absolutely, you can still have them drug tested and go through your proper protocols, like you have before.
From an employee side, what does an employee or what should an employee disclose as part of their applications if they are in fact a medical marijuana user, or should they? I think someone's telling me, we'll talk about it.
You should not disclose anything, because that's against HIPAA. They don't have the right to ask you whether you're a medicinal marijuana user, not whether you are being hired. So keep that in mind. Now, as far as what he was saying, there is nothing protecting the worker right now. That is true. The legislature has not passed anything with regard to discrimination law. They haven't made medicinal marijuana users a protected category under the law. I could see we're making an argument maybe under disability discrimination law, because a lot of the definition of disability encompasses a lot of the conditions that are on that list that would certify you as a patient. So I think that there could be an argument made for that. But those things, until the legislature passes some law, those things are all up in the air. And what we have to do as attorneys in establishing patients' rights are bring these kind of cases and get decisions from judges on them until the legislature acts.
Presuming a non-DOT or federally regulated position, what are you foreseeing happening as far as employers are concerned with their HR? Sorry, a little feedback there. I don't know which one it is. With regard to their employee policies and employee manuals.
That's why I was saying that you probably need to have someone, your HR representative, if you have a dedicated HR representative, they need to probably read Article 14. And you need to you do need to have a policy in place. You need to have some sort of a policy in place. He's correct that you still can't drug test. And right now, without some way of testing for impairment, you could probably end up with a lot of lawsuits being filed against you because, on the basis of discrimination. And that's what I was saying about just that they could say that the argument would be, I was disabled, I wasn't afforded reasonable accommodations, which would be me being able to partake at home in at-home use of medicinal marijuana. That would be the argument. But whether or not that would come out in the courts to work, we don't know. But what I'm saying is, you do need to have some sort of delineated policy. You do need to equally apply it. It's either being problems with equal protection claims, where you don't have the same policy as it applies to prescription drugs, which are the same thing now. That's basically what the citizens of Missouri have said. This is an alternative medicine to those things. So if you're
Please don't let me interrupt. Keep going.
okay,
Sorry.
so if you're going to fire someone and terminate them for marijuana use, then you may also have to consider that that a policy needs to apply even to prescription drug use as well.
So from a real-life applicability standpoint, you're looking at an employer who comes back in and amends their policies for drug and alcohol use, identifies what their policy is going to be, and then a situation arises through a random drug testing procedure that results in triggering an individual identifying as having been used. Not necessarily impaired, but having used. From the employer standpoint, you're going to potentially have a distinction being made between a recreational user versus a medical prescribed or medically authorized individual.
Absolutely.
And at that time, is that when you anticipate this comes up?
Absolutely. If you're using this for recreationally, you actually can't do that. It's still illegal to be using it recreationally. So you can't, that can't be your reason. You can't say that you're recreationally using it. You're not protected that way, is what I'm saying.
And I don't want to pop the mic here for it. Anyone else who has comment on that?
I am not a legal expert at all, but the science behind it, what I would like to kind of open some minds to is that we have something called the cannabinoid system. It's a whole other system within our body that works to prepare us from the inside out. So when people are using cannabis medicinally for a focused purpose, a lot of times, and it's going to affect everybody differently, but a lot of times what's happening when we are consuming and using that is our body is not necessarily going to be giving us a head high where we're just going to be like, laid back, unproductive at work. A lot of times because those people have neurodeficiencies, because their body is lacking something. Our body uses those cannabinoids and those terpenes that are in there to make our body function like a normal person should function. So the wording of impairment is going to happen sometimes. We can over-medicate like we can with cough syrup, we can with our pain pills. We can over-medicate absolutely. And that is something that you can see. And you'll be able to notice that that's happening. But keep in mind, a lot of people that are using medicinally focused, you would never even be able to tell that they are. That doesn't mean you don't have repercussions or like a policy and say you can't use it at work, you can't show impairment at work. Just keep in mind that our bodies are ridiculously crazy magical, and there's a lot of science behind it that I would just like to kind of put in there, although it's not legal.
Noting here that Kansas City has recently come out with indications they are going to be enforcing on marijuana issues. Do you view that as an opening of the door for potential recreational use? And what are your prognostications regarding that?
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely do. I mean, I think it's pretty widely known that, Kansas City in the state has actually been kind of the center for a lot of the progressive movements in the cannabis laws that have been written. I was actually a part of Normal Kansas City since late 2014, tried to help them get it on the ballot in 2016. So it kind of, St. Louis kind of falls after us. It seems to be like that with their local ordinances as well. It still doesn't mean that you can't be stopped in city limits by state or county officials and prosecuted. But I do think that it's a step in the right direction. I think a lot of advocates would like to see it taxed and regulated like alcohol and tobacco. So with that being said, yeah, you traditionally, when you look at the other parts of the countries that have passed medicinal laws, recreational is typically right behind those.
Any other comments? You covered it all?
There are 33 states now in the United States. As of last year, there's probably more now, if the truth be told, that have legalized cannabis. I've heard things that it's going to go federal. I absolutely believe that here in another year or two, it will be recreationally illegal here in the state of Missouri. So, absolutely. I think that I think that cities are going to be able to see the positive economic impact that will come from all the tax revenue that will come out of this. Educating your kids, being able to, have the money and funding to, build new highway systems and bridges. Bridges are collapsing all over the United States. I mean, these things need to be done. We need the funding to be able to do that, and this is where you get it.
And before you pass it real quickly, from a Missouri-Kansas standpoint, I presume you're licensed in both Missouri and Kansas?
I am not my law partner. I'm just in Missouri, but
So in
I do
providing,
know the law about this.
so I'll ask about this and not have it under any retainer. That's okay. So a Kansas employer then has employees on the Missouri side. Kansas is where it's not illegal or where it's not legal to utilize medical marijuana. Missouri, where it would potentially be or where it would be legal. That employee lives on the Missouri side and therefore is using legally. What's the impact for Kansas?
Well, the Kansas employer will have the discretion to do whatever they want with regard to that. It is medicinally illegal here in the state of Missouri, but it is in Kansas. Presumably, this employee, if they're working in Kansas, is not also going to be using in Kansas. But there also isn't any protection in place for this worker. So the employer would be able to have the discretion to do whatever they wanted to do. Also, again, once again, HIPAA applies, and so if they're putting, I guess, their business out on social media or something, that's how they find out, but they can't ask about it either.
And I doubled down on the question for you, I apologize. Destiny, did you have any comment with regard to the legalization of the potential recreational side?
Like they said, I fully anticipate recreational adult use coming to Missouri. I think that it's incredibly important that our medical programs stay intact while we go adult recreational, because we want to take care of our patients, our vets, anybody that actually has a need, because what we see is prices skyrocket, and it just helps protect them. But Kansas City is doing amazing things, I think, and I hope that employees do things responsibly so that they don't hinder our industry and they don't make employers feel like they're having to basically parent us or any of the patients at all. But yeah, recreational is coming. It's just a matter of time.
We have about 4 minutes before we're wrapping up for today. My brother asked me about a particular cost of a system, so I'll talk with you about that afterwards. But for the time being, is there anyone in the room who might have a question? Yes, at the back, please speak up.
Why did marijuana if it had all these
I think we got it. You want to repeat the question real fast for everyone?
So she asked why, basically back in the early 1900s, why there was a big push to, if it had all the benefits, why did they make it illegal? Well, truth be told, if you read the history behind it, is that the logging company was one of the biggest lobbyists against it, because they knew exactly the textiles, even just with the hemp. I mean, if you can grow hemp, that's less than 0.3. If you can't smoke 500 pounds of that stuff and feel any effect, because of, again, the textile industry. So they started with a marijuana tax on farmers that were producing it, and that just got heavier and heavier, where they just stopped, and then eventually they passed legislation that made it illegal.
Anyone else want to comment? We good? Ready?
I am presently not a cannabis user, but I do believe in its properties. I know it's helped children with epilepsy. I know that it's helped senior adults. I know that somebody like me that has severe back pain, it could help me. I am totally dumb to what it would look like to be a patient and medically want to find medical marijuana. So can somebody walk me through really quickly what that process would look like? John?
Yeah, I mean, first you'd have to go see, a physician or psychiatrist, and they would sit down with you and ask you why you think you need this. If you have any medical records that would support why you think you need this, then they would help you through the process and fill out the proper paperwork, and then send it to the state. Again, those physicians and those psychiatrists, they're not actually they're just reviewing your medical documentation. They're not verifying that even that medical documentation, that's not on them. They're just saying, yes, they meet one of the qualifying conditions. And again, kind of goes back to that catch-all. The physician feels like, okay, you feel comfortable that I can try this as treatments, then they're going to write you a recommendation. I will say I've been very, very blessed in my networking and out of state that my chief medical manager was Dr. Naisha Winters, and she has written 2 books on endocannabinoid health. And the actual future of cannabis in that setting, you hear so many times the words sativa and indica. Those are actually kind of archaic terms in kind of inner circles of people. But she actually gets invited into hospitals to speak in front of neurologists and neurology departments, because the problem with doctors right now is they don't have any research. They don't have anything to back it up on. All the research is being done over in Israel, Spain, UK, some in Canada. So with that being said, the future that they're trying to bridge is how you dose, how you prescribe, how is somebody with a back pain, because the genetic strains of this plant are vast. I mean, it is amazing when you start getting in there, the different genetic makeups and that can trigger different effects. So what their new research is showing is that they actually suggest a patient to come in and you actually have a genetic test done, just like a 22andMe or 23andMe. So you do that because it's kind of like the old saying, if you did smoke with a buddy in high school, and he's like, I didn't feel anything, and you're like, all right, whatever, man, like, it's kind of like, no, he was probably telling the truth, because you genetically, it probably didn't give him any of the therapeutic effects that you got. What we teach patients is it's really about the therapy profiles, because that's where they're actually making the connection between, okay, so your genetic makeup, and you're going to hit real high on the Lamoni and the Piney and the orange juice scales on those terpenes. So when you walk into a dispensary in the future, it's going to look more like a wheel, and where those spike counts are based on your genetic testing, that's how a doctor is going to be able to actually officially write you, hopefully in the future, a prescription for those type of genetics with the cannabis plant. I've just been very blessed to be a part of some people that are on the forefront of this. I mean, they're even developing medicine that when an athlete goes down, they have an inhalant that's full of CBD, and it just automatically brings down the swelling in the brain.
Additional input?
So you had asked about, once you turn that into the state, they will get you a patient card, and you're going to carry that with you on your person everywhere you go. Because in case and then it depends on where you want to get that too. Like I said, you could pay extra money, you can get a home grow license, and you can grow it right there at home, your own supply. Or you could hire what's called a patient caregiver that might grow it for you at another location, and that's where you would get it. Or you would go to a dispensary, and at that dispensary they're going to have flower forms of the product. They're also going to have the oils and vapes that you could buy, and also forms and edible forms of this that you can get there as well. So you're going to take your recommendation from the doctor and that patient card that you get. And like I said, if you are a patient card holder, you need to have that with you at all times, just in case you get stopped by a police officer. They aren't really doing any of this in Kansas City where they're prosecuting this anymore. But if once you get stopped and they ask you if you have a patient card, that should be the end of the inquiry. But there are just things that you need to be aware of if you're going to delve into this. That, like I said, in some of the outlying counties around here, they are still prosecuting for this. And I mentioned it earlier, the problems that you have when you have a substance, hemp, that is a completely legal substance, and you have marijuana, which, is not a completely legal substance. You can have it if you have a patient card. You will get yourself in trouble if you don't have that patient card. But after that, after you give them that patient card, then you be quiet and you don't say another word.
We are out of time at this point. I'm sorry, do you have additional you want to
Yeah, I
add?
was just going to tell her.
Go ahead.
So they were saying you would get a patient caregiver dispensary in that, and if you find a good patient caregiver, your patient caregiver can help you come up with various consumption methods. You don't necessarily have to sit around and smoke. You don't have to inhale anything really. You could have edibles. You could have the salves with the using the lower back pain. Like you could apply that to your lower back and get instant pain relief without having any head high, any impairment, any of that. So it's really important when you are going out and you're trying to find a caregiver that you find somebody that's educated, somebody that can help you consume in the best method and not cause you respiratory distress or anything like that.
Again, I apologize. We are out of time. It sounds to me, or it feels like we've got more questions that would come from the room. Are each of the three of you available? Maybe stick around a couple minutes afterwards? Excellent. Thank you.